And good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. It is 12 noon, so we are going to get started. Welcome to this month's Neovation webinar, What is Digital Accessibility and Why Does It Matter in L&D? I'm Susan Harrell. It's my pleasure to produce and promote these sessions with you, for Neovation. For those of you who may not know who we are, if you're a first-time visitor to one of our webinars, we are a learning and development company located in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and we do all aspects of L&D from learning platforms like SmarterU and AutoLearn to custom course development to other consultative services. Our newest product is Joy Suite, launching this year. We have an upcoming webinar on December 4th on how to supercharge your LMS using Joy Suite AI technology. It is quite evolutionary/revolutionary. We're very proud of it. So please consider joining us for that to get a sneak peek into what Joy Suite will be able to do for you. But enough about us. The reason you're here today is to hear from our subject matter expert, and it's my deep privilege to introduce my colleague of over a decade, Ashleigh Lodge. Ashleigh is the product team lead here at Neovation, where she oversees a team of developers, UX designers, and QA analysts. And they build our products that we are able to offer to you to train your teams. So she has over 12 years experience in software development and leadership, and she brings a deep technical expertise along with her passion for creating digital experiences that are accessible to all. And her story is a really important one because the move towards accessibility can happen to any of us. And she brings that personal experience to this discussion. She is now a recognized advocate for accessibility and inclusive design. And she shared her insights at major conferences, including TEDx, Creative Mornings, Inspire, Prairie DevCon. If you're in Western Canada, you know what that is, Confu. And she's also published articles in Code Magazine and with the Learning Guild. She serves on the board of Level It Up, which is an organization that supports neurodiverse job seekers in STEAM careers. Excuse me. So, Ashleigh, I will hand it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise.
Thank you, Susan, for that wonderful introduction. As Susan mentioned, my name is Ashleigh Lodge. I'm the leader of the product team here at Neovation Learning Solutions. Last year, in early 2024, I was diagnosed as autistic and with ADHD. But that wasn't really the beginning of my journey with digital accessibility. My journey started in 2010 with another diagnosis of fibromyalgia. Fibro is a condition that causes pain and fatigue and brain fog, and finally having a name to put to my symptoms was so freeing, both times. After my fibro diagnosis, I went online to learn more about fibro, and I discovered these communities of disabled people talking and sharing about their own experiences. But they also talked a lot about the lack of accessibility online for websites, apps, and of course, online learning and training. This was completely new information. Like many abled people, I didn't really think about these issues until they affected me. From there, I started making an effort to consider accessibility in my own work and advocating for it at Neovation. I think if more people know what accessibility is and what it isn't, they can start to implement it in their own work, or at least not destroy it by accident or out of ignorance. Today, we'll be chatting about what digital accessibility is and why it matters to all of us, regardless of our company or role. I'll be sharing some terms and abbreviations with you that are commonly used in digital accessibility communities and organizations. And we'll do a deep dive into the 4 fundamental principles of digital accessibility, which should inform how you approach your next project. I'm starting with these slides because I want to make sure that we're all starting from the same place, and I really truly believe that language affects perception. There's this quote that I love. It says, "Language tells us a lot about our culture and our traditions and our assumptions about life and everything around us. In many respects, language is the lens that allows us to see the world, and so many of us don't see things that aren't coded in our language." That's from Ronald Schaefer, Language is the Lens to Our Understanding, 2014. So, if you've run into anything about accessibility before, especially on social media, you may have seen this acronym, A11Y. This is actually a numeronym, There are 11 letters between the first A and the last Y in accessibility, so we remove those letters and drop in the number 11 instead. Generally, this is pronounced ally or ally or just accessibility. This is a fantastic term for hashtags, but kind of hilariously, it's terrible for accessibility. Unless you're already familiar with this term, it's not immediately clear what it means. Explaining numeronyms to people can be tricky. On the other hand, it really is a finger saver if you need to type the word accessibility 80 bajillion times in a document. There are like 12 I's and 8 L's in that word, and I don't think I have ever typed it correctly on the first attempt. Okay, I have a question for all of you. What percentage of the Canadian population is disabled? What do you think? What do you know? Maybe toss some stuff in the chat. So 75%, a third, 17, 25, 10. Getting lots of guesses. Some really high ones there, 80, 83. Okay, so people think of accessibility as a really unimportant or a niche topic, but if we look at the data, is that really true? According to Stats Canada, 20% of the population between 25 and 64 has a disability. That is over 8 million people in Canada alone. In the US, it's 25% of the population, which is 86 million people. Now, it's really interesting because 25 to 64 is considered the working age population, which is all of us, our coworkers, our users, our clients. Also, our population as a whole is aging. By 2030, seniors will make up nearly a quarter of the Canadian population, and the likelihood of disability does increase as we age. And of course, COVID has been a mass disabling event recently as well. That doesn't really seem like a niche or unimportant topic to me. Next, we have 3 different systems for referring to disabled people. If you have done or start to do any reading or research in this area, you will probably see a mix of terms. I think it's important to understand the foundations of each system. So we have person first language, which centers the personhood of someone with a disability. So person with arthritis or person with fibromyalgia. Historically, disabled people have been demeaned and dehumanized, so this system is meant to bring someone's humanity back to the forefront. Of course, that doesn't always mean it works as intended. Then we have identity first language, which is used to indicate that disability is integral to the person, not an addition or something that can be separated out. So autistic person or disabled person. The words disability or disabled are not inherently bad and are very much preferred over any euphemisms such as differently abled, handy capable, or even special needs. And then lastly, we have person-centered, which basically means everybody does have a personal preference, so if you're not sure, ask. Less than a quarter of children with disabilities were fully supported while attending school, which makes it less likely for disabled people to graduate high school or to attend college or university. Only 14% of disabled people have some university or college, compared to 27% of able-bodied people. These are really complex issues, but part of the problem is that standard tools, websites, and apps aren't fully accessible to all students, or for that matter, to all teachers. While a lot of disabled people prefer identity first language, person first language is very common, especially in legislation. So you may run across an abbreviation for person with a disability or people with disabilities, which is PWD. Then, of course, we've got the opposite term. So that could be non-disabled or maybe normal, but that's obviously not great language, vaguely insulting. So what you'll usually see is either able-bodied, abled, or temporarily able-bodied, TAB. Temporarily able-bodied is used for a few reasons. It originated as a way to build empathy. It's pretty likely that at some point in your life, you will experience an injury or a life-changing event and become permanently or temporarily disabled yourself, if you haven't already. The likelihood of disability increases with age, and all of our bodies are going to break down eventually. And an interesting way to think about accessibility is that, if nothing else, you're building for your future self, as well as anyone who currently has a disability. Less than 50% of working age disabled people are employed, compared to 75% for temporarily able-bodied people. And even when they are employed, disabled people have a median income that is $15,000 less than abled people. Those classified as severely disabled are 2 to 3 times more likely to be living in poverty compared to those with more mild disabilities or people with no reported disabilities. More than a quarter of disabled people haven't disclosed to their employer, and I didn't myself until a few years ago. Lastly, we have a couple of academic terms, but I think they're really interesting ways to think about accessibility. The medical model of disability says that you are broken and need to be fixed. If you're paralyzed and use a wheelchair, you don't need ramps or elevators. What you really need is a set of working legs. On the other hand, the social model of disability says that someone who uses a wheelchair isn't inherently broken, but rather society doesn't provide them with what they need to move around and live full and fulfilling lives. Now, neither one of these is necessarily better than the other, and they do work together. With my fibromyalgia and ADHD, I need things from the medical model, like painkillers, other medications, physio, massage therapy. But I also need aspects of the social model for all of my disabilities. Places to sit and rest when I'm out, the ability to wear loops while I'm out in the world, both of which benefit me by allowing me to conserve my energy for other tasks throughout the day. By the way, we were talking about wheelchairs a little bit. I just want to say that wheelchair bound is really terrible, awful, outdated terminology. Wheelchair user is the correct term, and that's because wheelchairs are freeing. Without a chair, someone may be stuck at home, unable to get around and live their lives. And also, not everyone uses a chair 100% of the time. So the next time you see someone using a wheelchair, standing up at the grocery store to get something off of a higher shelf, maybe don't be a jerk about it. They know their own needs and limitations and don't really need any commentary from the rest of us. Many of you are probably familiar with physical accessibility, even if you're not necessarily aware of it. Things like curb cuts, elevators and escalators, ramps, those little buttons to automatically open doors, pretty common out in the real world. But what about the digital world? What do you know about digital accessibility? Please put some thoughts, ideas, words into the chat. Voice to chat, WCAG, closed captions, fonts and colors. Not enough of it, absolutely. Contrast, logical order. Okay, awesome. Lots of ideas in the chat. Thank you all for sharing. According to Google, accessibility is the quality of being able to be reached or entered, the quality of being easy to attain or use, the quality of being easily understood or appreciated. Pretty literal definition, but like, what does that actually mean? If we're speaking of Google, let's think about YouTube. If you have a link to a video, you can access it, right? I'm here in Canada, so are a bunch of you, I think, so everyone is probably fairly familiar with this message. The uploader has not made this video available in your country. I may have the link to the video, but I can't actually access it. However, if I were to use a VPN to pretend that I'm in the US, then I would be able to access the video. In this case, I've used the VPN as a type of assistive technology to provide me with the access that I didn't have by default. Now I hit play, the video is in French. I never had the opportunity to learn French, so the video is inaccessible to me again. But I've gotten lucky and the uploader has included captions in English. So now I can finally watch this very strange video that is in French, not available in Canada, but is available in the US. Lucky me. My point here is that accessibility isn't just one thing, even for people with the same disability. There are multiple factors and parts that all work together to provide people with true access based on their needs at that particular time. Okay, so a website or an app or even a game isn't accessible to you. Well, what now? We have assistive technology that can help bridge the gap. Fundamentally, assistive technology is anything used by a disabled person to perform a function that would otherwise be difficult or impossible without that assistance. And many people use assistive technology every day without even realizing it. Have you ever gone into the settings of an app to change the theme or the font size? That's assistive technology. How many people here have one of those pop socket grip things on the back of their phones? That's assistive tech. What about using Siri to send a text message for you while you're driving? That's assistive technology too. We all use assistive technology every single day, but it's pretty rare that we actually think about those settings and tools as assistive technology. Those are just tools to make things easier. Well, yes, assistive technology of whatever kind makes things easier for the user, whether they're disabled or not. Because assistive technology is an umbrella term that includes assistive, adaptive, and rehabilitative devices for disabled people, while adaptive technology is anything made specifically for disabled people. So for instance, if you've got a regular tablet, iPad that's being used to communicate by a non-speaking autistic person, that's assistive technology. It wasn't developed specifically for this use, it's just a standard tablet. On the other hand, a prosthetic limb is a type of adaptive technology. There's really no need for someone without a limb difference to use one. And we're talking about technology, we're on technology, but this doesn't mean it has to be like high technology. My glasses are assistive technology. So is something like that rubber thingy that you use to open a jar when it's stuck. If you see someone using assistive technology, such as a cane or a wheelchair, please never ever touch it without permission. An assistive device can be considered to be part of or an extension of somebody's body, so it's quite rude to just grab at it. Some assistive technology is also specifically calibrated for the user, and you could damage that without intending to. There are a ton of stories online about wheelchair users who are self-propelling, and somebody just comes up behind them and grabs their chair and starts to push them, which leads to broken or dislocated fingers. Someone using assistive technology doesn't automatically need or want your help. Please ask them first. Okay, another good thing to keep in mind when considering accessibility is the types or the states. Is it a permanent disability like Parkinson's, or is it more temporary like a broken arm and a cast? Can you tell just by looking at someone that they have a disability? Sometimes you can. Someone with a white cane or an assistance dog is pretty likely to be disabled. But a lot of the times you can't. Someone with a heart condition, for example, may not always have a giant oxygen tank with them. And in those cases, they may receive a lot of pushback about their needs as a disabled person because they don't look sick or have visible differences or assistive technology with them. Did you know that the most common categories for disability are pain, flexibility, and mobility, followed by mental health, dexterity, and hearing, and then seeing, learning, and memory? If you put all your effort and resources into focusing on accessibility for people who are blind or have low vision, which is absolutely critical, you've actually ignored 6 other more common categories completely. And a lot of disabled people report in more than one category as well. If someone is deaf or hard of hearing and also has arthritis, you need to account for both scenarios as well as how they may interact. Accessibility, while it might be a new topic to a lot of us, isn't the wild west of the internet. The first screen reader was invented in 1978, and accessibility was considered crucial by the inventors of the internet back in 1989. When talking about digital accessibility, whether it's social media, online training, games, we refer back to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which is abbreviated as WCAG or WCAG. WCAG is organized around 4 principles: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, which make up the acronym POUR. Legislation all around the world is based on WCAG and the POUR principles, whether we're talking about provincial and federal legislation in Canada or the US, or the European Union, which just launched their accessibility legislation this summer. The POUR principles are the guiding foundation of WCAG, and they're really fundamental to understanding digital accessibility, So we're going to dive into each of them. Ensuring that your content is perceivable is the first step for accessibility, and it's the foundation for the other three elements. How can you operate or understand something if you can't perceive it? All input to our brains comes via one or more senses, with seeing, hearing, and touch the primary ways for humans to convey information, to communicate. If someone is blind, though, they would need to use another sense, like hearing, to access information instead. I'd like to take a minute to talk about one particular type of assistive technology that is pretty fundamental, which is a screen reader. From Wikipedia, we have this definition, which is a screen reader is a form of assistive technology that renders text and image content as speech or braille output. Screen readers are essential to people who are blind and are useful to people who are visually impaired, illiterate, or have a learning disability. And you know what's super cool? We all have a screen reader right in our pockets. Check out the accessibility settings on your phone or tablet and look for a tool called VoiceOver for Apple or TalkBack for Android. These are screen readers, and you can enable them and play around with them whenever you want. The key piece is this: screen readers render text or images as speech or braille, but today we're focusing on speech. Think about all the information that's available to you when you're looking at a course or a website. You can see the menu, either because it's visible on the page or because you know which icon reveals the menu. You can see the content. It's usually organized in some way. There's probably a large heading at the top and then some content, slightly smaller subheading, more content, more subheadings. There are links and buttons that direct you through the course or to other pages on the site. Click on this link to go to that page, click on that button to check out. There are probably at least some images, maybe to decorate the page, to evoke a specific feeling. Or if you're doing some online shopping, there are probably tons of pictures of all the products that are available to you. You're gathering and taking in all this information visually, and most of the time you're doing it without actively thinking about it because you just know how websites work. Screen reader users do the same thing, but with sound instead of sight. A screen reader will ideally be provided with all of the relevant information because the website or course has been set up to properly convey that information. Basically, a screen reader will tell you when you've encountered a link or a button or a header or an image because it has access to the underlying code. Accessing a website or a course via a screen reader is a very different experience, and I think it's one that everybody should try at least once. Consider doing it yourself on a site or with a course that you're familiar with, something that you use every day. What's the same and what's different about accessing it this way? Can you access it at all? Putting aside assistive technology for a second, lack of contrast is a very common perceivable failure. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines have recommendations for how much contrast there should be between the background of an element and the text on that element. Think of a button with text on it, or this presentation. The first line here is what we would consider high contrast in WCAG terms. This meets the AAA or the highest level requirement. The green text here is highly visible against the background, which is a sort of dark navy blue. The high contrast between these two elements means that the text should be distinct enough to be reliably viewed in various situations, like bright sunlight, and/or by disabled people who have low vision or those who are colorblind. This next line is more of a medium contrast. It will meet the AA level of WCAG, and it is readable, especially at these larger font sizes. But you can probably see how it's starting to blend more easily into the background, and it is going to be harder to read for some people in some situations. The medium contrast line here is the baseline for sufficient contrast in WCAG. And yet, over 80% of the most visited 1 million websites have contrast failures. Just think about visiting a site and having to leave because you can't see or comfortably read any of the content. This is the reality for many millions of people around the world. And then finally, we have our last line here, which is low contrast. I created this presentation. Honestly, I can barely read it. So if you're asking yourself which third line, I don't blame you. You might also be thinking, surely no one would actually create a site that's this bad, right? Sure, we've all heard of a little site called Google Maps. Many of the default colors in Google Maps are in the same low contrast range as my third line here. Digital accessibility, sadly, remains an afterthought, if it's even a thought at all. And even the big tech companies are putting out websites and apps that just aren't usable by many disabled people. Contrast issues are fundamental accessibility failures, but they're also usually a quick fix. There are even tools out there that can take your existing color palette and generate more accessible shades and combinations for you if you're non-technical or not sure how to start. We also can't just rely on color to convey meaning. Someone who is red-green colorblind may not be able to tell the difference between a grade written in green, meaning they passed, and a grade written in red, meaning they failed. Charts can be another place where we tend to rely mostly or only on color. Having the different slices in a pie chart only in these different colors can make them difficult to distinguish from each other. So try to add some texture or patterns to the slices as well, or bars in a bar chart. Another common perceivable failure is missing alternate or alt text. As we know, tools like screen readers will convert text and images into speech. But how does that work for images? The answer is what's called alt text. This is content that is associated with the image in the underlying code that is used when the image cannot be loaded or when the site is being navigated with assistive technology like a screen reader. The WCAG guideline states all non-text content that is presented to the user has a text alternative that serves the equivalent purpose. This applies to content like videos, which should have captions or subtitles, to purely audio content like podcasts, which should have transcripts, and then, of course, to images, which need alt text. If you remember nothing else about alt text, in addition to actually remembering to use it, remember that you are providing an equivalent experience to a user who cannot see or perhaps does not understand the image that you're describing. Because remember, tools like screen readers aren't just used by blind people. For example, if I have a picture of a cat on a couch, is the focus the cat, the couch, or something else in the picture? Understanding the purpose of your image will affect how you write your alt text. If the purpose of my cat couch photo is to sell the couch, you'll want to include the style, the color, the type of fabric. If the purpose is to show off your new kitten, then your alt text will be all about how cute and fuzzy the kitty is, maybe their color and pattern, or if their little tongue is sticking out. And maybe there are actually two cats on the couch, and you're doing a little find the cat game on social media, in which case you should indicate the second cat's general position, in addition to how well they're blending into the couch in your alt text. When you're writing alt text, you don't need to say that it's an image or a photo, unless the distinction is important, like maybe in an online art gallery. Image of and photo of are redundant because the assistive technology is already stating that this is an image, so you don't need to do it yourself. And try to keep the alt text as short as possible as well. Remember that instead of or in addition to just glancing at the image, a screen reader user is going to be hearing the alt text, which can get a little tedious when there are a lot of images with very detailed descriptions. Social media can be a really great place to explore alt text, from writing your own when you post cute cat pictures to seeing what other people write for their content. I'm a really big fan of the Star Trek minus context feed on Blue Sky, who always have really great alt text. So here we have a skeet with an image of Captain Kirk with the text, "Nothing makes sense," as part of the image. Then we have a version of the skeet with the alt text displayed in a black box with white text under the image. The alt text for the image reads, "Star Trek Original Series Scene. We're on the bridge of the Enterprise. Kirk is standing in a gold uniform and seems perturbed about something perturbing going on." Closed caption reads, "Nothing makes sense." This alt text is excellent because it provides a ton of contextual information, like which Star Trek series and character is in the image, what's happening in the scene, and then, of course, the text that is part of the image. They've even added in a bit of humor without obscuring or sacrificing the actual point of the alt text. Definitely worth a follow if you like Star Trek and alt text. And by the way, this is, I think, an essential part of presentations that tends to be forgotten about. Not everyone can see or understand the images that you're using in your presentations, so they should be described as part of your content, like I've done here. Now, there have been other images in this presentation that I didn't describe because those were more decorative, giving you something to look at while I spoke about that same content. But in this case, the image is the content, and I wanted to make sure that it was perceivable by everyone. All right, tons of ground covered with perceivable. Next up, we have operable. How do you usually interact with a site or an app? Probably by using your mouse to move around, tapping on your phone. You likely use a keyboard to enter data. What about people who only use the keyboard to navigate? Someone with a disability, such as Parkinson's, may not have the fine motor control needed to use a mouse. And some people don't use a mouse or a keyboard. A quadriplegic user may have what's called a sip and puff device instead. When we talk about the operable principle, we basically mean, can someone use the site with a keyboard? This is because assistive technologies mimic keyboard functionality. And this actually makes operable one of the easiest principles to experience for yourself. I have a dare for everyone. Go home, go back to work after this, disconnect your mouse, take the batteries out, and try to navigate through a site that you use every day. Do you know anything about navigating via keyboard? If not, is it relatively easy to figure it out with some trial and error? As a hint, you will want to use the Tab key to navigate between elements, and Shift Tab will take you backwards. You will also find the arrow keys, page up and down, and the spacebar and enter buttons useful. When you're using a mouse or other pointing type device, it's usually easy to tell where you are on a website because you're pointing at it. But when you're navigating by keyboard, unless the site is coded well, it can be really hard to tell where you are and how to activate certain types of controls. And if this exercise is difficult for you now, imagine if this was your first visit online since becoming disabled. Probably not very encouraging. Navigation, no matter which tool you're using, is a key element of operable, but we can also think about other items that might affect the operation of a course, like time limits. The time it takes for a user to take an action, say they need to click a button to move to the next step of a process, is not standard. And when you add in a disability and then maybe also some kind of assistive technology to the mix, that's going to make an even larger difference. Think about how someone with a motor disability may take longer than expected to click on the button, while someone with a cognitive disability might need more time to read the instructions. This can make having a time limit for an action tricky, and they really should be avoided completely if possible. Instead of just defaulting to having a time limit, really think about if you need a time limit for your course or quiz or purchasing tickets. If you do need that time limit, you must either allow the user themselves to extend the time limit, which can be done while they're in the course, or you need to have a process to request a longer time limit, which has to happen before they're even enrolled or assigned the content. Then lastly, in operable, we have error recovery. We always hope that processes are easy and successful, but what about when they're not? Breaking a longer process down into steps, providing clear instructions, and using confirmation screens and alerts benefit everyone, not just disabled users. What happens if I click on the wrong button in an app? Most of the time, that's probably not a big deal. But what if I was in my online banking and I just paid $100 to the wrong bill? Can I reverse or stop that payment somehow, or is that money just gone? In an online course, if someone clicks on the complete course button before they're really finished, how can the user get back into their course? Okay, so your content is perceivable and operable by a wide variety of users, which is great. But now, can they understand it? If you're creating long-form content like articles or blog posts or even process documents, make sure to break up long walls of text with illustrations, diagrams, even videos. and make sure they're all accessible as well. Depending on the type of content, you may also want to consider creating smaller, more targeted sections with their own headers and even a short summary, which can be really helpful for skimming and searching, as well as general readability. There are tools out there that can tell you the approximate reading level of your content, which can be useful in some cases. While generally a grade level of 8 is recommended, there are definitely situations where you're speaking or writing to a very specific audience, which will naturally make the reading level higher, such as this presentation. The words accessibility, WCAG, they're not standard words, so that bumps up the difficulty. And if you attempt to lower the difficulty of the text for the sake of accessibility, it will often make it harder for your intended audience to understand it, and it probably won't make it easier for people who aren't in that audience to understand it. The language we use matters. It depends on your audience, again, but unless you're 100% certain about their education level, their background knowledge, their life experience, and even their culture and ability, it is best to default to very simple and concise text. Basically, you shouldn't use a long word when a short one works just as well and probably better. So for example, instead of talking about the subscription expiration, you can just say when the subscription ends. Instead of listing out the additional features in the new benefits plan, just say the following features have been added. And instead of saying that the help site contains information on the product, just say the help site has product information. Functionality also needs to be understandable. No matter where you are on the web, a menu is nearly universally represented by what we call the hamburger icon, those 3 horizontally stacked lines. People know what this icon means, and they know if they're looking for the menu, that's what they need to click on. Mostly. Standards and consistency are crucial for accessibility. If there is a general standard, like the hamburger icon, use it. If you have a specific button that means launch course, always use that exact same button so that you're at least consistent within your own ecosystem. Forums and other types of interactive content are also big pieces of understandable. Think about when you see a forum for the first time and the submit button is disabled. Is it immediately clear what you need to do to enable that button, or do you have to poke around, filling in fields at random before it's enabled? Now, it's possible that someone without a disability would be able to figure out how to enable that button before someone with a disability. That is a terrible experience for both of those users. For courses, think about the overall flow of the course itself and if guidance may be needed to progress through the stages. Think about specific detailed instructions for interactivities like games and quizzes. And when you're writing these instructions, keep in mind that not everybody's going to be clicking. Another way to think about understandable is to consider context. I don't know about you, but I've always rolled my eyes a little bit at the common click here text at the end of a sentence on websites and in emails. If you're interested in signing up for our newsletter, click here. To see today's specials, click here. Links that say things like click here, more, continue, learn, they lose all context for all users, whether they're sighted or not, whether they're using assistive technology or not. When you're creating links, think about what the most meaningful part of the sentence is and link that text instead. If you want to direct someone to sign up for your newsletter, just say, sign up for our newsletter and make that text the link. If you've got a section of your menu for today's specials, just link that text. Getting rid of what's called ambiguous link text is actually 2 accessibility wins in one, because short words like more can be harder to target and activate for users with dexterity issues. The longer a link can be, the better, up to a point. And that will usually mean that it has more context as well. And then under poor, last but not least, we have robust. Does your online training work in Chrome? Probably. It's by far the most popular browser in the Americas and Europe. But does it work in Firefox? Firefox is my browser of choice, but the market share is very low, and a number of sites and tools have dropped support for it. But what if the assistive tech that I need only works properly in Firefox? Then you have the Edge browser. Edge is actually based on Chrome, so it's pretty likely that it works there. But then we have Safari, which if you have an iPhone or an iPad, a Mac, you're basically locked into using. So you'd certainly hope that it works there too. Speaking of Apple devices, does your content work on all of them, including desktops, laptops, watches, even TVs? And while Apple is very popular in many countries, it is far overshadowed by the number of Android users worldwide. So what about them and all of their many and varied devices? The key for robust is that unless there's a critical compatibility issue, everything should just work. Whether disabled or not, some people are bleeding edge adopters and they have to have the new tech right now, while other users will hold on to their devices and apps for years or even decades. When we think specifically about digital accessibility, we should recognize that disabled people may have fewer choices for their devices due to their additional needs, and that they're less likely financially to be able to update every year or two. Robust doesn't mean that your course needs to work on every version of every browser and every device out there, but you shouldn't be too restrictive. Saying that it will only work in the latest version of Chrome really isn't good for anyone. What about someone whose assistive technology doesn't work in Chrome? What if they're in a place where they can't install Chrome? They don't have permissions on that device. So that's a high-level overview of the 4 key areas to think about for digital accessibility. When you're designing or creating a course, when you're updating a training handout, when you're posting to social media, and when you're communicating with your team, always think about POUR. Is what you're doing perceivable by all users, including those with low vision, those who are blind, and/or users who are deaf or hard of hearing? Is it operable by all users, even if they don't use a mouse or other pointing device? Can you use it with a keyboard? Is it understandable by all users? Is your language too esoteric or your functionality obscured by the use of non-standard icons? And then lastly, is it robust? Can users choose their own technologies, including devices, browsers, and assistive tech? Of course, talking about something is much easier than doing it, and accessibility always seems to get a lot of pushback for some reason. Maybe someone has said to you that there's no time for accessibility, or accessibility is too hard. And anyway, it's not like we had any complaints about accessibility issues because none of those people actually work here, right? Yikes. So first off, as we've talked about today, you have no idea who is or isn't disabled just by looking at them. And not all disabled people will disclose to their employer, especially if they're new to the company. And to be frank with you, disabled people are used to poor and non-existent digital accessibility and have any number of tools and tricks to get around the barriers that they experience literally every day. But they shouldn't have to. And while I firmly believe that the moral and ethically correct thing to do is to make our tools, products, and content accessible, it's also correct from a business perspective. Remember the stats from the beginning of the session? 1 in 5 Canadians, 1 in 4 Americans. Over 90 million people in just those 2 countries. And both countries have accessibility legislation at the federal level and frequently also at the state and provincial level as well. By not making accessibility a priority, your organization is leaving themselves vulnerable to lawsuits, human rights complaints, and financial consequences if you fail to meet accessibility requirements. One thing to remember and to share with your team and company is that accessibility is always easier if it's thought of and integrated from the beginning. Of course, trying to retrofit in accessibility is going to be hard and take a long time and be expensive. You're trying to add a ramp onto a building that was only ever planned to have stairs. That's a big change. But if ramps were considered from the beginning, then it would just be part of the blueprint and it would get built right alongside everything else. One really cool thing about making things accessible is that it actually benefits everyone, not just disabled users. This is actually known as the curb cut effect, where a change or a feature done for accessibility reasons actually makes things easier for non-disabled people too. Which means that accessibility work can perhaps be rolled into and framed as general usability improvements if there are still business concerns about the time and effort required specifically for accessibility. And yeah, when you're just starting out with accessibility, it can be tricky or confusing or not make a lot of sense. But isn't that true of anything new that we learn? Just like anything else, you need to build yourself an accessibility toolkit and expand your knowledge and skills as you go. Knowing anything about accessibility, even just the word accessibility and a vague idea of what it means, puts you in a better position than many people out there, unfortunately. I really hope that the information I provided today will help you keep accessibility in mind, no matter what you're working on next. I encourage you to just put the word accessibility out there. Accessibility, whether physical or digital or both, always has a role to play in our work and even our personal lives. When you're considering which LMS or authoring tool to use, when you're planning out fancy new interactivities, and when you're testing your courses, put the word accessibility out there. Maybe it'll force you to reconsider some assumptions. Maybe you'll realize you can get the same results with a simple quiz instead of a drag and drop activity, or that the last quiz in the course doesn't need a time limit. And you know what? Maybe nothing will change this time, but maybe next time it will. And maybe the time after that, you'll consider another aspect of accessibility. These may seem like small changes, but they are important ones, and we all have to start somewhere. Don't forget about other internal tools and systems. Just because it's not a product you're selling or training materials for your employees doesn't mean that accessibility doesn't matter. In particular, do you know if your authoring tools are accessible at the point of creating content, not just consuming it? What if you were to hire a blind employee tomorrow? What if they were another L&D professional, like many of you? Would they be able to use all of the same tools that you do to create training materials? If you're involved in the selection process for new tools, ask if they meet any accessibility standards. And do your best to verify that they actually do meet those standards versus just being a marketing point. Put the idea that accessibility is important into more heads than just yours. At Neovation, we know that improving accessibility in your tools and e-learning provides benefits internally and externally, including showing that your organization is truly dedicated to inclusivity and ensuring that all employees have the access and tools needed to participate and succeed. As we've talked about, making accessibility-focused improvements is often a win for all users, whether they are disabled or not. And of course, there is also the existence of accessibility legislation that needs to be considered. Providing inaccessible tools and content isn't just an annoyance anymore. It can have very real financial and reputational consequences, which is another lever or data point that you can use to prioritize accessibility work. You and or your team likely have a lot more to learn about digital accessibility. We all do. So consider checking out some of the training resources we will be sharing after this session. I strongly suggest picking up the basics of how to check for or validate accessibility fixes yourself, like keyboard navigation, basic use of a screen reader. You can also use automated tools to assist with identifying issues in your existing content and create a list of improvements that need to be made. You can avoid common accessibility issues by creating and using checklists in your work. There's this really great project called the WebAIM 1 Million that identifies the most common accessibility issues on the top million most visited websites every year. That's a really great place to start with common and easy to fix accessibility issues. Once you've done everything you can on your own, consider a third-party accessibility audit to ensure that you have done everything possible to make your website or content accessible. There's a really fantastic local Winnipeg company called Squarely Accessible that can help you with any or really all of these pieces, depending on your needs. And then lastly, every step of the way, you should be including actual disabled people from your design phase to the building phase to the testing phase. Testing ourselves and using automated tools is crucial, but we don't know what we don't know. And the diversity and varying needs of disabled people mean that there's no such thing as 100% accessible for everyone. Make sure that it's clear to your team, company, and users that accessibility feedback isn't just welcomed, it's encouraged, and that you're committed to making continual improvements. Thank you all so much for spending some time with me chatting about digital accessibility. It's a topic that I love. I think it's hugely important, and we can make very real, significant changes to people's lives by just thinking about it a little bit more than we did yesterday. A friend of mine likes to say that practice makes permanent and that we should focus on progress over perfection, which is a great way to approach digital accessibility for the first or second or 10th time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us at this Neovation webinar, and we will see you next time.
Thank you all. It was great.